I'm excited for today.
Well, we've been planning and plotting.
Tell everybody what you cute texted
Oh my
me.
God. Okay, so we have talked about this several times, but I continue to feel so angry that it's accurate and true and valid.
Wait, before you tell, I'm gonna lead you, give you a tee up for your story, because Eric said that he was looking at something came across his feed about Fated Mates, and so he like clicked through, or like I forget. He was like, I was somewhere and I was reading, and somebody who was very complimentary about the podcast apparently was like, but yes, we have read that Lorraine Heath book, you guys.
See? God, terrible. Eric was like, you guys are constantly talking about the same books. And I was like, okay, what's your fucking point? No, I did not feel that way. I believe, though, I was like, you need to not give me this kind of feedback the first week of school.
That's not a good time.
This is not a time where I'm going to be able to take that in.
So we didn't. We put that feedback away, but then we came back to it.
So what we're trying to do is like when we have big episodes where we're like, okay, everything we're going to talk about is new. And I regret to inform you that I have been having a nice time.
She keeps texting me. I'm so angry that Eric is right.
I'm so angry that Eric's right.
And I'm like, how do you think I feel? An absolute insult.
Terrible.
That my husband is sometimes right.
Terrible. Cannot be born.
So in this scenario, he is not my husband. He's just our producer. I just can't face it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's 2025 and I cannot face my husband being correct. Welcome everyone to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor.
And we wanted to draw everybody's attention because we are discoverability buddies.
It's true.
If you are the person who said discoverability buddy to us, could you please like Instagram me or hit us up on Blue Sky or Threads or somewhere so that we can name you, because we love you and like we now use this
all the time.
That's all canon.
In-house and also on the podcast. What were we going to say? Oh, it's Black History Month.
Bookshop.org.
It's Black History Month, and bookshop.org has a great list of Black romance that you can get this month, and I think it's 20% off. And a bunch of these are books that we have talked about or put on our best of list or have said are upcoming and you should check them out. And so we will put that link in show notes. And I think this is probably just for print books. But the other thing that is really cool, everybody, is that bookshop.org now has a reading app for buying and reading digital books. Now, here's the thing about bookshop.org. I want to love it in theory, but by the time you if you are just buying one book, like with the shipping fees, it just feels so expensive, right? And so at that point, I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to go down to Seminary Co-op and buy this book and save myself that. So the thing is many romance readers are reading in E. And so bookshop.org is like great in theory, but has in practice, we are not seeing that people are using these links a lot. So they just opened an ebook store, and you have to, you have to buy on, your computer, and you can't buy it in the app, just like with Amazon or whatever, or Kobo or what have you, and then read in the app. But the thing that is great about this is, as you may be familiar, ebook prices are stable across platforms, right? So if you're going to buy an ebook, this means you can buy an ebook and same energy. You say, okay, Seminary Co-op is my local bookstore that I always designate. Or you can change it up every time if you want to. And then you buy a book, you buy ebooks and read them on your devices. And I actually downloaded, kind of as like a lark, it was funny, Tara DeWitt. Really, I just admired her greatly one day for something on social media. She called someone a fascist. And I was like, Tara, I don't know you, but I want to. And so.
But also, can we talk judging a book by its cover? Those books have great covers, those Tara DeWitt covers.
So I downloaded the one called The Co-op.
But also, Excellent work.
Excellent work, Tara. Excellent work. So I downloaded the co-op because also it made me laugh because my seminary co-op is my local bookstore. And I gave the app a little bit of a test run. And,
And how was it?
It's great. It does all the basic things you want it to do, right? So it's like you can do some basic functionality with like changing the font. You can do like reverse, black and white, in terms of like having a dark background. You can have it be infinite scroll rather than paginating, right? Like turning the page. And so I feel like it does all the basic stuff you want it to do. And if you're reading on a phone or a device, an Android device or an iPad or whatever, then you can just have it be one of the suite of reading apps you have, because I'm sure like all of you have a bunch of reading apps. I know I have like 20.
All right. I want to talk about the books.
Okay. I know.
So there's a device. This is another reason why we're mad at Eric right now, everybody.
I am. I'm like, why are you doing this to me? It's so wrong.
Okay. So there is this like device. It's called a Boox, Boox.
The Palma.
And it's an e-reader. And so Jen you read on an iPad.
I read on an iPad because I have so many different reading devices.
Yeah.
And so
which makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You need the
do not like to read. I like e-ink. I do not like to read on a screen. It makes my eyes feel funny.
Yeah.
That's why I wear like glasses that have yellow tinted lenses in them. Like I have an eye thing. And so for me, e-reader is very valuable. But the problem is that I have a Kindle.
Yeah.
And like, aside from the fact that it's like a weird size and doesn't fit in your pocket,
Correct.
and it's kind of a hassle, it's also like it's just a clunky big thing to have to like carry around with you. Listen, I know everybody's like, Sarah, do you always have a book in your bag? Yes, I do. It's not the same.
Excuse me. What the fuck? I better.
Do I always have a paper book in my bag? I do. For some reason, that's not clunky, but a Kindle, which is a third of the size, is. Don't at me. But this new thing,
I know,
it's called a Palma, and it's not that new because this is the second generation of it.
Yes.
Is the size of an iPhone, and it's e-ink.
And it's an Android device.
It's an Android device, so you can get yourself off of that, billionaire platform. You can get yourself onto, say, Kobo or bookshop.org.
Or all of them at once.
Except for Kindle.
No, you can get a Kindle app on there. There's a Kindle app for Android. Yes, Sarah.
On books?
Okay.
On the books?
Okay, Sarah.
Wait, now Jen's going to tell me, everybody. She's going to tell all of us. She knows more.
Everyone, it's an Android device. So if you have a Google phone, you can get the Kindle app, correct? Yes, correct. So you can essentially get every reading app. This is why it's really... I could basically replicate my iPad situation, which is I have the Kobo app, the Kindle app, the books. The only thing you probably cannot get on there actually would be the Apple Books app.
Right, which is fine because I don't use that anyway.
But you could get Google Play, you could get Audible. So essentially, if there's a reading app for it in the Android store, then you can put it on this device and essentially have then all of your ebooks in one place on an e-ink device.
Amazing.
I know. I really want one.
So it's not cheap. If you're out there, books people, if the marketing department at Books would like Fated Mates to say, try this out and like tell our users if it's great. Jen and I are here.
We're here for you. Yeah.
It's not the cheapest tool in the world, but it is tempting. Can I tell you the best part? So Eric showed this to me, and then it was like everywhere. Like then everybody's talking about it. Like when bookshop.org launched, it was like, hey, look, you can also get this cool device. Here's what's funny about it. Literally 2 days later, so enough people must have gone and done this, that 2 days later, I got a dedicated email from Amazon AI trying to sell me one of these things. And I was like, oh, Amazon AI, you really messed up. Jeff Bezos does not agree.
I've done all the research. I just have not actually bought the thing yet. First of all, if you are a dedicated ebook reader, I think it's $280. It is a lot of money, but it's like worth it if you're going to be a heavy user of an e-ink device. I have heard, though, that it is better to buy it from a third party, like buy it from Walmart or buy it from Amazon. And that way I have heard their customer service directly is a little tricky. But yeah, I mean, I'm really tempted because I essentially, like I said, could replicate my reading situation on my iPad, but on an e-ink device. So I actually have a freestanding Kindle as well, and I really haven't been using it. And then I actually dug it out of its hole and plugged it in and took it upstairs. I was like, maybe I'll have an upstairs e-reader and a downstairs e-reader. And because I was like, do I really like e-ink? I just haven't read on it in so long. And I was like, oh yeah, it's fucking great. And then I was like, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
Good. If anybody out there also like gets tired eyes and the phone/iPad reading is breaking you at night, which mine does, the e-ink really is a godsend.
Here's the other reason I like, well, and I essentially have tried to replicate this on my reading iPad, which is the great thing about these e-ink devices too, is like you cannot drift away to like look at the fall of democracy.
No, you're in the universe.
There's less distraction. So on my reading iPad, I don't have my email. I don't have any apps outside of reading apps. I'm just like, I just want to make sure I can't really do those things. I do have like a browser just so I can like buy books from it. But anyway, so the book's Palma 2.
So you said upstairs and downstairs reading, and I wanted to ask, have I told you my story about when I was a kid and the upstairs and downstairs reading?
No.
Okay. My mother is English, and my grandparents lived for many years in a like seaside town in England called Budleigh Salterton, which is amazing. The most English town name
100%
anybody has ever heard.
If I read that in a book, I'd be like, come on, don't do so much. Stop trying so hard.
It's a real place, everybody. It's in Devon. It's on a map. Okay, so, but they lived in this big... I don't honestly. Well, I've now described this to my mom at one point, and she was like, "It wasn't that big."
Well, you were little,
like,
yeah.
I was little, and in my head, it was this like massive, like Victorian house, right, by the sea, and it was by the sea, and it was a Victorian house, but it was not. My mother is like, it was not massive. But it had 3 floors, and the top floor, the 3rd floor, was an attic, kind of like an attic space. It had like a real gabled roof. And so like you couldn't probably be able to stand up there, but like, and there were 2 very small twin beds, and we were sort of shoved up into this attic. Right. And this house was old then. So it made a lot of noise, and it was like creepy and like creaky. And also it was England, so it rained all the time. And you'd be up there and like the rain would be raining and like the house would be creaking. And it was like the kind of house where, it was old electric. And so like, things would flicker, or like if it was dark, it was really fucking dark.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things, I don't know if you were like this ever as a kid, but like, did you ever like, were you ever in the basement or whatever, and you'd like shut off the light and then race up the stairs, like out of fear that there was something there
to get me?
This was basically my grandparents' house on that 3rd floor. But that's where I slept. And so I was a kid, and we would go for long stretches of time in the summer to basically, because it was so expensive to go to travel in, the 80s, that we would go for like a month at a time. And there was a library in Budleigh Salterton, and that was the full extent of my entertainment, because my grandparents had like a TV that had 2 channels on it. And I would have an upstairs book and a downstairs book, and the downstairs books were the downstairs book was like The Witches by Roald Dahl, which is fucking terrifying. And the upstairs book would be like a Mills and Boone Doctor romance. Because I certainly was not going to read anything that was even remotely scary.
No.
Upstairs in that
in
fucking
the scary room. No.
Attic.
God, no.
So that's what it was. And thanks to the librarians in Budleigh Salterton for introducing me to Mills and Boone medical romances.
Bless. Listen, doing the Lord's work.
I know. For my upstairs reading.
Upstairs, downstairs, but make it books. Okay. That is actually the perfect metaphor to launch into what it is we will be discussing today, which is the new historicals. Now, let us explain what we mean. Last week we had Adriana on and we talked a lot about just the state of historicals. And obviously we have historical authors that we return to again and again. But what
we know you've read the Lorraine Heath.
Fine, you've all read Gorilla Twins. Congratulations.
I mean, you could all go reread it. And you'd have a lovely time.
Everybody knows about fucking St. Vincent. Okay, so what we challenged ourselves to do was to bring you an episode where we basically talked about books we've never mentioned before. And in many cases, authors that are new as well. Right. So we searched high and low. Some of these are traditionally published. Some of them are independently or self-published, or kind of a small indie press that only does, ebooks or whatever. Some of these I found on my own. Some of these were referrals from people, direct referrals or recommendations. Some of these I just someone mentioned it on social media and I downloaded it that minute, and I had a big old collection on my Kindle called The New Historicals.
I have the same collection, but with different books.
Yes. And
because I went to KU, I was like, I am going to Discoverability.
Yes.
This fucking list of KU authors.
And listen,
and I downloaded
so
32
hard.
Kindle Unlimited historicals by names. The rule was if I had heard the name, I did not download it. I literally was I'm only downloading people I've never heard of. And then I supplemented with some other people who I knew I had wanted to read. And this really gave me the opportunity to finally read them.
So what we're going to do today is just talk about these historicals and recommend them
to you. The ones we like the best.
I don't think we're going to get through all of them. There's a handful at the end that I was like, oh shit, that person has a new book, or we've mentioned them before. So we might mention some books at the end that we haven't read. And then I think some books, if they come out starting in March, we will put into the spring reads episode, right? So we're really looking at books that essentially you will not have to wait to read. Everybody's really excited, and by everybody, I mean me and Sarah and everybody, about A Gentleman's Gentleman by T.J. Alexander, but it doesn't come out till March 11th, so we're just going to hold on that one.
And there are also, I should say, other books that are coming out. We, for example, talked about The Trouble with Anna, which is Rachel Griffith's debut historical, which comes out end of the month. And I mentioned it on the winter reads episode. I'm also going to talk about that book once it's out. But I really feel it's just not, I think we both feel it's not as valuable to you all to hear about books if you can't get them today.
Right. We are trying to restrict that as much as we can to those preview episodes.
Plus, Fated Mates is on the record for being deeply committed to the historical genre. We are going to put historicals in as many episodes as we possibly can.
Right.
So stick with us.
So we really, and I also think it helps us when we're okay, what is the small, narrow thing we're trying to do here? Because otherwise, it can get away from us. So to that end, Sarah, do you want to start?
I do. I'm so excited.
I know, I'm really excited about it too. There's one I'm so excited about. I won't tell Sarah anything about it.
I know. She keeps writing, and then a surprise one.
The surprise book, because it's so fucking amazing.
All right. I'm going to start, and I want to apologize ahead of time because, I read a lot of people who, I'd never read before, and I apologize in advance if you've been around for a million trillion years. But here, I'm rectifying it now.
This week's episode of Fated Mace is brought to you by Rayanne Gray, author of Double Exposure.
All right, you ready for this? You're going to love multiple layers of this. So Gillian Rhodes, our heroine, lies to everyone she meets. She is one of the world's best art thieves.
I love it.
She has basically spent her entire life as a Reacher-esque heroine. She has flown solo. She gets hired to do these jobs. She does the stealing. She returns the item. She gives the item away, and then she makes money, and it's great. She gets hired to steal a collection of photos belonging to a kind of controversial dead guy from the Art Institute of Chicago around the corner from you. Everything should be business as usual, except it's not, because she has two problems. She is not the only thief aiming for these photographs. There's someone else also aiming for them, and that is Sloane Caffrey, who has their eye on the photos and also is Gillian's hot ex. Gillian and Sloane had a terribly messy breakup 3 years earlier. They have been shenaniganing and competitioning and getting vengeance on each other for ever since. And now in this latest theft, they are absolutely at each other's throats, except it starts to become clear that maybe this whole thing is a setup for the two of them to get caught and sent to prison.
Uh-oh.
So will they work together? I think they might. And this is going to be just like a sexy, heisty romance.
I love it. So if you are interested in this very fun enemies to lovers, we're stealing art in Chicago. I said that in my most Chicago accent, and everybody. You should check out Double Exposure. It has a woman and one non-binary main character, which is awesome. And it is all about stealing hearts, not just stealing art. Thank you to Ray and Gray for sponsoring this week's episode.
All right. I want to talk about Maggie Sims, and I want to talk about a book called Lyon's Lover. Lyons. So I was predisposed already to enjoy this
because of the Black
Lion.
Sure.
You
felt it.
The Lyon spelling of lion has really like embedded itself deep in my DNA. Okay. So the tee up of this book is the heroine of this book is a courtesan who is ready to retire. She's like, I have a gorgeous house. I have I have all the money I could ever need. I have done the job. I have lived the life. I have had multiple lovers. I enjoy sex. I am all is well with me. But I would really like to have a family. And so I need to find a person who will marry me, knowing that I was one of, the great courtesans of our time. And who wants to have children and won't be upset that I've been a courtesan, because that's just how it is. This is first of all, A+, unapologetic courtesan is how I want all things to go. So she goes to a kind of house, a sex. It's like a bordello. It's run by, a particular kind of, a particular woman. And she goes there and she says, and she meets the woman and she says, listen, I'm looking for, this is what I'm looking for. And would you please help me find the right person? And so the woman who runs this basically matchmaking situation says, yeah, okay, I can help you, but you need to do me a favor first. This place is also a gaming hell. There is a young lord who is kind of a wastrel, very much a rake, an alcoholic, and comes in here and he drinks too much and he gambles too much and he is in debt to me for a ton of money. And she's and I need you to basically sobriety check him. I need you to be his
his sober companion.
He needs to dry out, and I need you to do that. And if you can do that for me, I will then provide you with the name of the person who you should, court and marry. Give me some time. So, Bella is yeah, okay, fine. Who could it be? And we meet Luke, who is known to his friends as South. we meet him because his father is like the Duke of Northumberland or something. And so like the joke is his father thinks he's so unlike his like stern and, staid father that they call him, instead of North, they call him South. This is important. I'm not just like telling you everything, although I could easily tell you the whole plot of this book. Okay. So we meet Luke like on a tightrope. They basically have said to him, like, if you walk across, there's a tightrope strung across a like bed of nails, and if he can get all the way across the tightrope while like fully drunk without falling, they will waive his debt. But if he can't, they'll double it. And of course, he falls onto the bed of nails. It's very odd.
Men are so dumb. Like, God bless.
Totally believable. And she's like, oh boy, I
have my work cut out for me.
So she takes him home, and Jen, she does what really the only reasonable thing to do, which is she chains him to her bed.
I was like, what is Sarah about to say? Oh, sure.
Like, they're not in bed together. Like, she's like, she empties the house of alcohol. She discovers that he's like kind of a mess and like desperate to find alcohol literally anywhere in the house. She's like, well, you give me no choice. I'm just going to chain you to my bed and you'll have to sleep on the floor. And of course, like, it gets very sexy in that like one night she wakes up, or she's like, they're both there and they've had this like kind of like sexual like back and forth, very tense, a lot of tension. And then she can like hear him jerking off on the floor. And she's like, you better stop. And then it's just like hot, right? I mean, like, anyway, it's very sexy and very hot. And then here's the problem though. So when she decides, I left this part out, she decides when she goes to ask the courtesan for like a person, she's like, the courtesan is like, well, do you have an ex-person, an ex-lover who you wish you'd married? And she's like, actually, I do. Like, there was this lover. He was great. I really loved him. He was like such a decent person, and he would have had me, but like, I didn't want to leave London because I was young and stupid. And what was his name? North.
Oh.
Yes! Is that not the greatest?
Oh, wow.
So eventually, Jen.
Dang. I am shook, Sarah.
Oh, dear. So that is Maggie Sims's Lyon's Lover. It is also, for those of you looking for an age gap where the heroine is older than the hero, this is for you. I very much enjoyed this.
I would bet you that you did.
And it is, according to the internet, the Lion's Den has 72 books as part of the series. So I don't know what's going on there, but I might read more of them.
Sure.
Is what I'm saying.
Well,
fully intend to read more of them.
Why wouldn't you? Are they all by her? No, they're probably like one of those things where that.
Oh, I don't know. It's a good question.
Right. It's probably like one of those things where they're, yeah.
Correct.
I got you.
I bet the Lions, you know what? The Lion's Den is probably the sex club.
Yeah. I mean, what are you new here?
Do I know this for sure? Yeah, the most notorious gambling. Listen, do I put it together? It takes me some time.
She was like, I was too delighted by North and South.
Yep. I really enjoyed this book. So that is Lion's Lover by Maggie Sims.
You said age gap. So, all right. Challenge accepted. I am going to talk about The Sapphire Heiress by Ella Lyon. And this is a debut historical. And this author reached out to us and I was like, yeah, like, thanks. We're about to do a historical episode. Well done. Good timing. And it's an own voices romance. The author is Filipina and the heroine is half Filipina. And so what happens is, okay, so I open this book up and it's 1809 and our hero, Ethan Locke, is a pirate.
Oh,
I was like,
no notes.
Instantly online. And what happens is he's plundering the pirate ship and he finds like a treasure chest type thing, like right in the captain's quarters of this other ship. And inside there are these two very strange items. One is a sapphire that is all like on like a chain that has like some sort of like filigree around it. And then the other is like this little tiny bottle. And he takes both of them. And one of the guys on the ship is basically like, you really shouldn't do that. But, you know, he's a young, dumb pirate. And he's like, fuck you, I'm going to take it. He doesn't say that. That's me saying that. So, and then he like goes back to his own ship. This is the end of the prologue. And then the next chapter 1 starts and it says 33 years later. And I was like, what's going to happen? Because he was like 25. It makes the point of saying that he's 25. So I was like, wait, how is this going to be his son? Like, what's going to happen?
Happening?
Okay.
Is he 56 years old?
Sarah, that Sapphire stopped the aging process. Exactly. Except,
guys, historical romance is fucking bananas. I love it so much.
You have to understand that I was instantly like, oh, hell yes. So he and the little bottle essentially like is an elixir that can fix any injury.
What?
Right. So
this is very lucky.
Right.
So is he cursed though?
Yeah. No. So here's the thing. 7 years earlier, our heroine, her name is May Blackthorn. Her father was like Ethan's like buddy, and they pillaged throughout, you know, wherever pirates pillaged, and had all of this booty. Sorry, I'm like a child.
I got
it. And her father essentially stole it all from Ethan, including the sapphire 7 years earlier. And so Ethan has started to age again. Right. So now he looks like he's in his early 30s.
Her father has stopped aging.
No, because now he's dead. And so Ethan has returned. And here's the thing. May has, you know, grew up in this house as like a, you know, like a lady. And then when her father died, she had no idea that there's like a literal hidden treasure with a literal pirate's map hidden on her property.
Amazing.
And so the house got sold to these terrible people, and they essentially were like, well, you can stay on and be a governess. And they're like new money. So May runs into Ethan, and he is there. Really, he's like, I want to get this sapphire back, because the thing about this book that I really admired is there's such intricate plotting. Right. So it's not just like she's got the money and he doesn't. Right. Like she had an evil ex-fiance who tried to do her wrong and she thinks killed her brother, and that guy is in cahoots with Ethan, and then there's another guy named Pierce who wants the sapphire back, and he's part of this like group called the Silver Lords or something like that. I can't remember, right? And so the whole entire book essentially is like super twisty turny, where Ethan like betrays her and she finds out, and then he promises her like, no, don't worry, we're going to split it with you. And like, right. Like all they want to do is find the treasure. But like, so you think like, oh, okay, that's the end game of this book, but like, it just keeps going. So anyway, I really loved it. It was a super fun read. And
awesome.
Lots of really rich detail, lots of characters. Like it just felt really fun. And I really enjoyed the portrayal of May as a woman who essentially was like loved in her home, but like kind of an outsider in this like, you know, Deadwater of England, Budley Salterton or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? So
forevermore, we'll just,
that's where it is.
They're all in Budley
right?
Salterton.
So anyway, it was great. I really liked it. And there is a, like a second book in the series that comes out, I think in March. It's the Silver Order, and Pierce was like the head of the Silver Order, and he was basically like, you got to give me that sapphire back, because there's like a secret society, and the second book is about Pierce.
Well, I mean, also it feels like this is a very important item.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So anyway, I loved it. It is such a fun read, and like I said, like the minute I found out that like the hero essentially has stopped aging because of like the magic sapphire, all in. So The Sapphire Heiress by Lyon. It was great.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Stephanie Burgess, author of Wooing the Witch Queen, the first in her Queens of Villainy series, narrated by Amanda Lee Cobb.
So in this book, Queen Saskia this is going to be a trilogy, and each one has a different magical queen. Here we have Queen Saskia, and she is, listen, everybody, a wicked sorceress. I'm not sure if you knew. And she wrested control of the throne from her evil uncle, and now she has a job to do, which is like keep her people safe from the evil empire next door. But that means that she has to be like whipping up some new spells. And she does not have time to like organize her magic library. Well, wouldn't you know it, a mysterious dark wizard named Fabian appears at her door, promising that he is the one who can like sort of, take care of her cataloging needs. Honestly. And so little does Saskia know, she just thinks he's like a little sweet, a little nerdy. Yeah, he has some strange requests, but fine, whatever. Little does she know that he is actually an imperial archduke in disguise.
Yes, a secret duke.
Exactly. I love it. And I think one of the things that's really fun is that Amanda Lee Cobb just does a great job narrating like the delightful kind of like turns of the plot and, how Queen Saskia is leaning into her evilness and yet she can't even really figure out that like who this guy is like right under her feet. So I think it really does a great job at capturing like how delightful and fun this is as like a premise.
Well, listen, I am super excited about this, especially because the tagline is "Love can be a witch," and that is so fun. So if you also are excited about it, you can read this book in ebook, print, or audiobook. And for a special treat for Fated Mates listeners, if you hang around at the end of the episode, you can listen to a sneak peek of Wooing the Witch Queen by Stephanie Burgess and narrated by Amanda Lee Cobb. If your podcasting app supports it, smash that chapter title right now, and you'll be taken to a sweepstakes where 5 lucky listeners will receive free copies of Wooing the Witch Queen. Thanks to Stephanie Burgess and Amanda Lee Cobb for sponsoring this week's episode. You said like a really fun like cast of characters, so I'm going to go to Joanna Lowell's A Sure Thing. That's Shore, Shore.
Sure.
And Sure, A Sure Thing. This is set in the 1880s in Cornwall. And it's really charmed. This is like, I was so charmed by this book. Okay, so Kit is our hero and he has transitioned and he's in a bit of a place because before he moved to Cornwall a couple of years earlier. And before he moved to Cornwall, he was a really like magnificent painter. And he was part of like a sisterhood, quote, of artists who would like work together and like spend time together. And they had this like rich, beautiful friendship. And they were painters and sculptors and like artists. And when Kit transitioned, they kind of turned their backs. They turned their backs on him. And they basically said like, if you're a man, then you're not part of the sisterhood. And in kind of breaking that relationship with him, they not only broke his heart, right? Like, I mean, the loss of the group is keen, but also they broke his love of painting. And so he hasn't lifted a paintbrush since the dissolution of the sisterhood, or since he was cast out from the sisterhood. Instead, he's moved to Cornwall and now he sells bicycles.
Sure.
And so he sells bicycles and there is a gang. Okay, it's not really a gang, but it feels like a gang. It's a group of men who ride bicycles around Cornwall in the 1880s, and they're called the Mutton Wheelers. Okay, the problem is the Mutton Wheelers are for men only. Okay, and they ride. And now I've pushed the name of the bicycle out of my head. But those big, but the ones with like the high seat and the giant front wheel, they have a name and somebody is yelling it at their. Okay, so they ride those around. And Kit is basically now like selling. You can get one of those big bicycles from him, but he is now selling like normal looking bicycles, right?
Sure.
And he's trying to encourage women to ride bicycles. Now the Mutton Wheelers Do not like this,
Of course not. God forbid.
You might notice I haven't talked about our heroine yet, so let's get to it. Muriel, our heroine, is described in the book by Kit as blunt and bossy.
I love her already.
So a queen. And she is in Cornwall because she is about to go to New York. She's about to get on a boat and go to New York and give a very impressive talk about British seaweed to the New York Society of whatever the fuck. Doesn't matter. Romance science. So she is like padding around the Cornwall coast with her gay brother who loves her and like is following her around. And the meet cute in this book is one of the best meet cutes ever because she's like on the top of a cliff, like in Cornwall, like kind of vibing, like she's been sort of chatterboxing her way up the hill, her brother like following along, and she gets onto the path at the top of the hill and like somebody shouts, like somebody rings their bicycle bell, and then she turns and there is a bike coming down at her and like there's a collision and she knocks the man who is riding a bicycle like clear off the cliff. Has to go over the cliff to help him. And it's Kit. And Kit is like, these two are so flirty, like right from the jump. And then like her brother comes like down the hill and is like, what's going on? And he's like, and there's like a back and forth and there's sort of a like, I don't think he's like her brother. He's not actually her brother. And he's like, well, he's a doctor. He's like, well, I've been prescribing seduction to, Muriel forever to see, she could really do with one. And Kit's like, well, I'm happy to like lightly seduce. And then he just kisses her right there in front of Cornwall and seaweed and everything. And then they get up to the top of the hill again and there are the mutton wheelers. Ready to, and they are like, women, like your dumb small bike is dumb, and women shouldn't, you're causing trouble and ruining everything by renting bikes to ladies. And so they make a wager, these idiot men make a wager that like, if Kit can get a woman to ride a bike for like X number of miles
Right.
and like not get tired and like beat the mutton wheelers or whatever the fuck, then they will like stop. They will let women into the mutton wheeler club. I got to be honest, I'm not sure why anybody would want to be in this club, but they will let them in. And if they don't, then Kit will give them his business, like close up shop because he won't rent to women anymore. Right? So of course, Muriel is like, I volunteer as tribute. I'll be the lady who rides the bikes. But Jen, it's so and then she's like, oh, by the way, but I'll only do it if you, Kit, excellent painter, paint me some seaweed pictures for my talk.
Fair.
Listen, a lot's going on here. But it's really very fun and it's so flirty and like the banter is like top notch. And the mutton wheelers and wait, and there was something else I wanted to tell you about, but now I can't even remember.
We're going to do an entire episode on motorcycle clubs and we're just going to call them the
mutton wheelers. Oh, I know. There's a moment like there's a moment sort of early in the book where like she stumbles upon like Kit and the mutton wheelers like, having a rumble. And the rumble is they are on bikes and they're basically bicycle jousting with pool cues.
Listen,
and
it's like Footloose.
One of them every time one of them marks the other one with like the chalk from the end of their pool cue, that's a point. Honestly, I cannot. It's so fun.
That's great.
This
I
book
love
is
it.
so silly and fun, but like also really like lovely and emotional. And like Kit finds a whole new like Kit finds a family. Kit finds people who love him, and like it's great, but like it's also just goofy and silly and has it like.
The mutton wheelers.
The mutton wheelers.
Really, I don't really think I can beat that. Okay,
so that is Joanna Lowell's A Sure Thing.
I could have gone with the artistic element, but I am instead going to go with the book that also like delighted me like this, that I just giggled my way through it. And it is The Duke's Bartered Mistress by Caroline Lee. Caroline Lee. Sorry, okay. Caroline. Okay, so in this one, our heroine is Georgia. And her father is in debt to this, burly, cranky Scot named Demon Hale. Sure.
Demon.
And he is Lord Edmion. How do you say like the myth? Edymyon. How do you say that?
Edemion.
There you go. That's why he's demon. You got you. Okay. That's the name of his estate. So and the book actually begins with these letters in between Demon and the father, and the demon's basically like, I've bought your debt and I will give it back to you if you tell me where your brother is. Like, he wants information in exchange for this. He's not interested in money. And the father's like, let me give you some money. And he's like, no, I don't want money. I want the name. So the father sends Georgia, his daughter, up to negotiate as his agent. And so she comes knocking on his door. And Demon, Sarah, he was like an agent of the crown. He's terribly scarred. I know. I knew.
I love
exactly.
It. I'm sorry. I am such a basic bitch for it.
This book is like, seriously. And so like he fired all the servants except for like there's two, like the housekeeper and like one maid and then like one footman named Bruno. And at like one point, legitimately, they make a joke where like George is like, "Where's Bruno?" And the housekeeper's like, "We don't talk about Bruno." And I was like, "Oh, it's that kind of book." You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of book, everybody. So anyway, she says to Demon, "I'm here to buy back my father's." And he is like, "Absolutely not. We're not going to do that." And she's, "I'll do anything." And he was like, "Anything?" And he does a thing where he's like, "I'm fine, be my mistress for the next 6 weeks. And then you can go back to your father and the debt will be paid." Thinking, of course, that he will scare her off with his, terrible scarred face and offensive suggestions. And he like writes it out on a piece of paper. "I will." And it literally is like,
because then it's a contract.
Like, I will.
That's romance law.
Yeah. It basically is like, he's like, "Fine, sign this." And it's like, it like literally is so insulting. Like, "I will bend over and lift my skirts whenever you want me to." And she's like, "All right, give me a pencil." And he was like, "What?" And she bends over, Sarah, and lifts her skirts. And listen, I would like you to know, everybody, sometimes I feel like my husband will walk downstairs when I like say these like dramatic pronouncements. But like, how we have talked about like the utter greatness of a book where a hero goes down on her before ever kissing her on the mouth?
Yep.
This man, his initial foray, he fingers her asshole. That's it.
Pardon me.
Before anything else.
Right in there.
Yes.
And 400 levels.
Because she's a widow. So, she's... And this is the part that's then really interesting. So anyway, the whole book is just like giggly and silly. He has... Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I enjoyed this book a lot. But like, for sure, there are times like his Scottish brogue is like really thick. And then other times it doesn't exist. And none of this bothered me.
Don't worry about it.
That's all. It doesn't matter. But the part that was really interesting to me is... He then writes a letter to her father, which is like, "I've defiled your daughter." And she has written a letter to her father that's kind of like, "Don't worry, I'm staying in the village." And it turns out that she got married to someone that, she had a great time with. They had a lot of fun in bed, purely to spite her father trying to marry her off to some old man. And she has been essentially, and then her husband died. She was still very young. They were married less than a year. And so she really feels like, I have to do this. Like, this is the only way my father will continue to support me, that I can show him how committed I am. And so the whole entire time she thinks like, my dad doesn't know what's up, but Demon has told him the truth. And the father is basically like, "Oh, well." And so it's really like a pretty, so the whole time it's like giggly and silly and they're just like fucking all over the place. And I enjoyed that a lot. Right. But then you're kind of like, what's the emotional core of this book going to be? And it's going to be this thing where Demon knows something about her father that like she doesn't know, which is that he essentially really has agreed to like prostitute her in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's really fun, but I think that it's one of those books that's like super giggly and super silly, and for sure there would be times that I would not be in the mood for it, but like in the past couple weeks I have been in the mood for this. It felt so light and fun, but there is like a core of like serious stuff there, right? And and then like what Demon is trying to figure out with essentially is like who was responsible for the fire that burned him, because he was, betrayed. So that is the Duke's Bartered Mistress.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Stephanie Rose, author of Just One Favor.
So Olivia and Tyler are the kinds of friends where like their parents forced them to play together when they were kids.
Oh, the worst.
It is the worst, right? And so they have grown up essentially being enemies, and she just thinks he's an annoying jerk. He's sexy, yes, but also grumpy. He is a baker, but even his delicious chocolate chip cookies have not convinced her to like give him a chance. However, he does need a favor from her. His terrible ex-fiance who left him for his best friend is going to be at his cousin's wedding. And for romance reasons, he asks Olivia to be his fake date. So she is like, I cannot let you suffer through this by yourself. So yes, she agrees. And they go to the wedding and they are swept away by wedding feelings, as one does. So all of a sudden their fake dating is real kissing and real something else, because all of a sudden, surprise baby, 9 months from now,
you guys,
what are we going to do? They're going to have to figure it out together.
Oh, boy. Well, you can read this enemies to lovers, or friends to enemies to lovers, or friends to enemies to friends to lovers standalone romance with a hot side of longing, sexually charged banter, and a broken hotel bed, one of my very favorite microtropes.
Correct.
Right now in print, ebook, or audio, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Stephanie Rose for sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, well, I'm going to go with Bartered Mistress here because I have one too. But it is not silly. It is very dark. And like this one is, I think it's like, if you're into dark romance or mafia romance, like this is for you. This one's for you. The Villain by Victoria Vale. Now, I want to preface this with everybody. It's a duology. So the first book ends on like, it's not a cliffhanger, but it ends. And then like there's a whole second book. And that's, what it is. I don't know what to say. But listen, this is a full-on, everybody knows I am all vengeance all the time. Like that's all I want in all of my books. And so we meet Daphne, our heroine. She's literally, it's very gothic beginning. She's like climbing a hill to a dark castle in the rain at night. Okay. She bangs in Scotland. She bangs on the door. The door opens. This like scarred like servant is inside. And she's like, I'm here to see the Earl of Hartmore. Tell him Fairchild has come to see him. And she's dressed, we discover, as a man. And she's been the only way that she can imagine this man letting her into the house is if he thinks she is a man in her family. So the servant goes and gets the master of the house, the Earl of Hartmore. And he comes to her and immediately clocks that she's a woman.
Right.
And is like, you're not Fairchild. And she's like, no, I'm Lady Daphne. I'm my brother's sister and my father's daughter, and I'm here to find out why you have set out to ruin our family. And it becomes clear that like he has taken every penny from them. They've had to this family that once, was well respected and had lots of like money and power now has nothing. And it's because like this man, Hartmore, has like methodically ruined them. And he's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You stay here as like mine for 30 days and 30 nights in my bed. I will pay you 1,000 pounds per night, right? 30,000 pounds at the end of this.
That seems like a lot of money back in olden times.
And I will tell you exactly what happened that made me like decide to destroy your brother and your father. And she's like, well, I don't have any choice. Like $30,000 will save my family.
Sure.
Right. Like, and so she's like, yes, okay, I will sell myself to you. And then Jen, I mean, this man is like, I'm going to break her. And then like immediately goes down on her.
Sure. He knows the rules, romance rules.
And he's like, I'm going to be terrible to her. I'm going to destroy her. And he's like, let me make you come 1,000 times. You don't even have to touch me.
Right. I don't deserve it. Right.
Exactly. Right. So then like it becomes clear that like he has a sister who was like her brother that like who was wooed by her brother like under false pretenses that her brother like raped his sister. Ooh. This is a dark book, right? Left her pregnant. There is a child that that her brother has like essentially turned his back on. Their father has like done everything they could to like cover everything up to ruin like Hartmore's sister. Like this is a very dark, like there's a lot of like deep, heavy like darkness in this book. And what's great about it is one, it's like incredibly sexy. And also it's one of those, it feels kind of old school in the vibe of like, he has set out at the beginning of this book to loathe this woman. Yeah. Like he is like, and this is what I have been waiting for. This is the final instrument
of my revenge,
of like my revenge. And then he like just cannot control himself. Like he is like, he can't stop falling for her. Like there's a line in chapter 6, like nowhere into this book. And he says, do you think I care if you stay, that I'll come running after you like a dog chasing a bitch in heat? And I'm like, oh, this man is done for. Like,
I think you will,
done
sir.
for. Because she's also like so strong, this heroine. At one point, I don't know, like halfway through the book, she discovered it's very like Beauty and the Beastie, right? Like there's a wing of the house that she's not allowed to go into because that's where like his sister and her child live. And he like pieces out for a couple of days because like he can't deal with feelings. Like he's like starting to feel feelings. And so he's like, I got to get out of here before I feel like real feelings for this woman. So he leaves and she's like, well, fuck that. Then I'm going to like explore this house because I'm bored. And so he comes home and discovers that she's like broken the rules and gone into the West Wing or whatever the fuck. And then he's like, get out. And she's like, no, I need the money. Like you promised me 30 grand to sleep in your bed, which I have been doing. And he's like, get out. And so he casts her out into like a cold storm, Scottish storm. And you know what this bitch does? She sleeps on the doorstep.
I love it already.
And I'm like, oh, Jen's going to love her. Like, right? She's like, fuck you. You owe me money. And like, he can't, of course, bear it. Like, he lets her sleep one night and then he's like, I
can't.
Like,
right.
Yeah. Like, he brings her in and like right straight to bed.
I love it.
I didn't get to eat you out last night. So
I missed my nightly meal.
So anyway, this ends with, I'm just going to tell everybody, it ends with a cliff. And like, it's not a cliffhanger. It ends with like her going back to her family and like really having to reckon with like how terrible her family has been. And she is like, he set me free, because he's like, I'm too terrible. Like, I've treated you too poorly. We can never, like, you can never love me. And I certainly, like, he's like, I can never love you. But what he really means is like, you'll never love me. I'm a monster, right? Don't look at me. Don't perceive me. And then, like, we instantly, like, in the epilogue, he's like, I can't fucking deal without having her. And then he's like off to London. And then in the second book, he's in London and there's like a whole other thing that happens in that second book. The first book is great. The second book is very solid, and you'll have a lovely time.
I'm going to read book 1. You know, I never read the second book of the cliffhanger, but I will read that first one and have a great time.
Yeah. I'll tell you what chapter to skip to in book 2.
There you go. Just get it over. Yeah, get to the end.
So that's Victoria Vale's The Villain.
Okay. I am going to do another revenge book, like a little less intense maybe. And this one is called Exit, Pursued by a Baron. And it looks like maybe Adra Richards is this. I don't know. You think I'm sorry I didn't look that up. Okay. Anyway, in this one, the book starts off with Lydia on stage in London I think it's The Winter's Tale. And she is looking out at the audience and just thinking how much like the London crowd sucks because all the the aristocrats are there to like see each other and not the play. And she looks up and she meets the eyes of Marcus Beaumont, who was her lover. She was a seamstress in like the modiste shop. 5 years earlier, he'd taken his sister there and saw her, and he fell in love with her and put her up in a house and like put her up as his mistress. And then became convinced that she was cheating on him and cast her out and said, you will never return to London. Like, I will ruin you if you do. And so she is right. So she's like, okay, so this is her first time back, and Marcus has seen her, and he like, and he's just like, she can feel the like virulent hatred, right? Which of course is not really hatred. So he shows up in her dressing room and is basically like, I told you not to come here. And she's like, it's none of your fucking business. I'll be here for a month. Like,
fuck you.
Slow down, buddy. But like, you can tell immediately, like they basically are both totally in love with each other. So then what happens is so he goes back home and he's just like, I must get my revenge. And she's like, that fucking bastard ruined my life. And here's the part I really liked. I think this is a book that really does a pretty good job of dealing with like this as a class issue. So Marcus is obsessed with her. And basically he goes back like the next night with his sister, the one that he went to the modiste with. And she was like, well, you ruined her life. What's your problem? Why do you think you've been wronged? And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you put her up in a house and you threw her out of town. What do you think she has no money? Did you give her money? Like he threw her out. He like cold threw her out. And so Marcus is kind of like, am I the baddie? Right? Is his journey in this book. And
that's my favorite.
It is my favorite, right? Am I the baddie? And then he sends his brother. And so what he's convinced is, I also liked how matter of fact this is, like her like boss, her manager of the guy who's like putting on the play or whatever, is like very matter of fact that basically the only way that actresses and actors can really make a living in this job is by like taking
also being courtesans,
right? And so, but she is like, I'm not going to do that. Like I thought I was in love. I thought we were going to get married and he threw me out. So I'm not doing that anymore. So she lives in like a real rough part of town in St. Giles. And so one night Marcus is like, he says to his brother, go follow her and find out like who's she with. So Mark, the brother like knocks on the door and is like, I'm here to see Lydia, and like basically gets her in trouble with her landlady, who's like, I run a nice clean boarding house, right? And so the brother goes back to Marcus and is like, buddy, you really fucked up. She's living in a shitty part of town renting a shitty room, and I think I might have just ruined that for her. And Marcus is like, am I the baddie? Right? Like,
does he go and get her?
Oh, hell yes. He goes and gets her, and he kidnaps her and like forces her to live in his house. And
horrific.
All of the things.
No notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. Kidnapping A+.
And I was just like, and she was like, you are the baddie. You just kidnapped me. And he's like, but for your own good. you know? So anyway, the whole thing is honestly fucking great. And I just really, you know what it was, is I really found, I like a man who has to grovel.
Yep.
And I think like the fact that he starts out being so convinced that he was wronged. And then finally his brother and her sister are like, how did you come to decide that she had been cheating on you? And then he like just explains and they're like, are you stupid? Like basically like it was really, he just like lost his mind. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. I definitely got a few laughs. There's like a lot of really good banter between them. And, essentially she's like, I'm not going to be in love with him. And then they like kiss and stuff. And she's like, I'm going to get my revenge. And it's great. So they both want to revenge each other, Sarah. Exit Pursued by a Baron. It's also a great title. This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by LUMI Gummies.
LUMI Gummies has been a sponsor of Fated Mates for a long time, and we're very happy to have them back for 2025 because you can't just be out here raw dogging 2025.
No, absolutely not.
We like them because they're consistent, they're mellow, they're delicious, and LUMI Gummies are specifically designed to make you feel good but not stoned. Whether you're looking for an end-of-day de-stressor, a midday mood boost, or help getting the best sleep ever, LUMI Gummies has a strain that's right for you. And I just have to tell you, Jen, the other day I was with somebody and it was like, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and she was like, oh, I just took my gummy and now I'm going to go home and write for the rest of the afternoon. And I thought to myself, what?
Oh my, what a plan.
And so I think she must take a sativa gummy because sativas they don't have a sleepy effect. Or at least they're built to not have a sleepy effect. But they are just sort of like, I assume they just like quiet the noise and give her a chance to write. And listen, I'm not lying. I'm going to try that. And then I'll report back in a future ad. But if you're looking for, just a way to calm down and de-stress, these could be the right choice for you. Or like if you're having trouble sleeping which a lot of us are doing these days, you can take an indica gummy. Or if you just want to quiet like the noise of the world and not worry about your rectangle while you're watching a movie, then you can take a hybrid gummy and enjoy yourself that way. We all take them here. We have our favorite flavors, and you should try them.
So LUMI Gummies are available nationwide. Go to lumigummies.com. That's LUMI gummies.com and use the code FATEDMATES for 30% off your order. Again, that's lumigummies.com and the code is FATEDMATES. lumigummies.com, code FATEDMATES, and you too will have a better day, a better movie, a better sleep, and hopefully a better 2025.
Wow.
No
a
pressure.
Big promise, but let's hope so.
Thanks to LUMI Gummies for sponsoring this week's episode.
I want to talk about Royaleen Singh because you said, well, first of all, you said brothers. So, but also like a little bit of second chancey going on here. So, the book that I read is called Seduced in a Storm, which actually you can get free from Royaleen's website if you sign up for her newsletter. It's a novella. It's a real delight. It's set on Holy, and Malini and her sister grew up as like neighbors to these hot twins.
Okay.
The Earl of Dashwood, Aditya, who is called Adi in this, and his brother. And his brother, we are told, broke her sister's heart by kind of like saying that he was going to marry her and then like piecing out to Greece for some sort of like travel. And Malini is very fiery and like hot under the collar about this. And it's wholly it's the Holy Festival. And if you don't know anything about Holy, there are a lot of like, it involves like colored chalk.
Oh, cool.
And so there's like a kind of, part of the like joy, it's a celebration of spring. And like part of the experience of it is like people paint each other kind of like as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll like touch somebody's face and like wipe like a colored chalk on them. And then everybody gets like colorful and dirty and like, I mean, it's not really dirty because it's just like colorful and beautiful. And then, and so she knows that this this twin who broke her sister's heart hates this. Like, he hates having to then, like, he hates getting mussed up. And so she decides she's going to, like, take a handful of this stuff and, like, find him and throw it at him and, like, basically prank him. It's all very harmless. And she, like, sneaks into the house to, like, find him. She finds him, like, his back is turned to her, and she, like, calls out, and he turns and she throws this, like, colored chalk at him, and then realizes she's got the wrong twin. Turns out that she has the actual Earl of Dashwood, the oldest of the twins, Addie, who does not hate Holy and definitely does not hate Malini. Because 6 years earlier, or some number of years earlier, they were teenagers, and it was a different Holy, and there was, like, this, like, fiery kiss between them. And then Malini kind of freaked out and decided, like, she didn't know what to do. Like, he was the Earl and that wasn't going to happen for her. And, like, she just sort of, like, got in her own head about it and then, like, immediately stopped talking to him. And so he became really convinced that, like, she hated him and, like, something had been done. So he took off, started a law practice in India. And then when it turned out that his brother and her sister kind of were talking about getting married, he was like, I have to get back and I have to see her and see if there's something there. So he gets back, and he's like, and they are, like, a little bit at each other, but she sort of takes off onto his estate, and it starts to rain, and this is a novella.
Okay.
And so where are they going to go, Jen, in the rain, but the nearest groundskeeper's cottage?
There's only one place to go when it's raining.
Everybody knows that if it's raining, you go to the groundskeeper's cottage.
I built one in the empty lot next door to our house. Come on.
So they go to this cottage, and of course she's wet and she's cold. And what does he suggest? Like, you have to get out of your wet clothes.
Of course.
And he's like, I won't do anything untoward. I'll just warm you. And then he's like, I mean, this is very hot. He's basically like, once he's warming her, he's like, he's basically like, I can't handle this. Like, and he like has this great moment where he says out loud to her, like, all I can think about is kissing you. All I can think about is, like, doing terrible, depraved things to you until you beg me to do more.
Yeah.
And, like, she's like, yeah, I kind of want that. And so, like, basically this is like a really beautiful morsel of a novella. Like, it doesn't overcomplicate. It's a really straight shot, and it is just like two people who've been dancing around each other and, like, thinking the yearning in this novella is really great. It's very clear that these two have been, like, thinking about each other for years.
What's the title again?
It's called Seduced in a Storm, and it's by Royaleen Singh. And I think you can actually only get it if you sign up for her newsletter on her website.
Okay. Well, we will make sure that that's where
but
the
there
link
is
goes
also,
to.
and I have not read it, her first novel is out. It's called Betting on a Duke's Heart, and I haven't read it. I have it on my Kindle, though.
Okay. You said siblings. So I am going to talk about A Bloomy Head by J. Winifred Butterworth, which I think does. So this is like a romance kind of Regency mystery. There is a murder at the heart of it, but also like a big family. And so, and I thought, now, okay, fair warning, everybody. I'd worked on this book, but you can trust me. I really think this book is extraordinary. So it starts off essentially with like a young girl in 1794 in France, like essentially watching someone in her family get guillotined. So it is like the French Revolution. And she takes off. And the story picks, and this is 1794. The story picks up 25 years later with this woman's children as like a big kind of unruly family. And the main character is Kate. And she has essentially has been married. Her husband has died, so she's a widow, but she was never able to have children. She had many miscarriages, a couple miscarriages. And so her brother-in-law is essentially like, get out. You didn't do your job, right? And these were terrible. Her husband was, not a nice person. And it essentially, like, we kind of find out through the course of the book, like, why she kind of ended up leaving home when she did. She has a twin brother, Henry, who has returned from the continent with Thomas Holyoke, a doctor who is very injured and near death. And Henry is basically like, all I know. Henry is sort of, he knows everything about farming, but he is not very good with people. And all he knows to do is like bring the doctor home. Like he sells off the doctor's medical instruments and like they get on a boat and they go back to England. And so essentially, like, the beginning of the book is Henry is coming home. Kate is like walking back to like the family farm and there's like a dead body. And both of them, for like whatever reason, I don't think Kate sees it right away. Henry does, but he's got the doctor and he just keeps on going. And this body has been beheaded. Now, when she gets back, she's
Jen.
No, listen. And you're like,
what's happening?
Here's the part that's so crazy, Sarah, is like, for as much trauma as these people have, it's all off page, right? Like people, the characters reflect on the trauma, but it is not like, you're not reading about this stuff like in real life, in real time. And it's kind of, I don't know how to explain the magic by which all these traumatic things happen, but this is such a warm and like, I don't know though. I'm like struggling for the right word, but the way this book made me feel was just like really like enveloped in this family that like loves each other desperately, but doesn't know how to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right. So Henry knows,
I love that.
right? Henry knows that there's a dead body. Mom is gone. Their older brother, John Mary, is like somewhere, but like not really anywhere that they can like see. Like there's evidence of him, but he's not there. Peter is the vicar, and his job essentially is he is like really slimy, but he will do anything to protect his family. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's just like a real power player in like whatever this location is. And then like one of their brothers, Jake, is at sea, and then Anne is the younger sister. And so like Kate comes back and like like all the cows are just like wandering around and like, there's no windows and everything just is like falling apart. And Kate's like, okay, well, I know how to make cheese and the cows are milking, whatever. I don't know how cheese works, you guys. So I'm going to just go ahead and like do that so that we can sell them to keep the family in order. Now, meanwhile, Thomas Holyoke is laying in the front room, like dying, and Kate is nursing him. And what Kate discovers, and it is just like no big deal to her because of her brother, John Mary, is that Thomas is a trans man. And so he has like essentially like something that he wears in his pants that looks like a little penis so that like other men can't tell like what's going on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas wakes up and is basically like, I am where because it is very close to the place he grew up. And to the really, truly evil villain of this book is Thomas's uncle, who terrible things happened to Thomas before he transitioned. So anyway, the whole story is really about like all the siblings are trying to protect each other and they all have little pieces of information. Meanwhile, Kate is falling in love with Thomas, and it's such a beautiful story because she just has such a pure, accepting heart. And she also, and of course, Thomas is like, there's like a really beautiful thing that I think is happening in this book, which is like a really true exploration of how terrifying it would be as a woman at a time where you'd suffered miscarriage after miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to prevent pregnancy. You just have to suffer through this.
Yeah.
And so Thomas's knowledge, both as a doctor, like his personal experience with, like sort of doctoring, and then knowing that like actually Kate loves him for who he is, but also there's this thread of her thinking like, I don't ever have to worry about this man almost killing me. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is such a richly layered book. All of the characters are so interesting. It's there continues to be dead bodies, and the siblings come under the fire as being the potential ones who have done it, and they all think that someone else in the family did it and are trying to protect them. And
Amazing.
it is a truly marvelous book. Like, I really loved reading it. I think it is so just like beautifully written, both like as like the romance between Kate and Thomas, obviously, but as like a really beautiful portrait about like family and how we love our siblings, but also desperately sometimes are like, what the fuck are you up to? And then like kind of watching them all like work in concert without kind of even really knowing it. It is a terrific read. I loved it very, very much, and I think you will too. A Bloomy Head by J. Winifred Butterworth.
Well, I'm going to stick with siblings. I read this one today. And I was like so excited about it. Okay. So I want to talk about Never Woo the Wrong Lady by Charlie Lane. So in this one, Andromeda is she and her sisters have an erotic lending library. And
I love it.
And they like keep all their sexy books in a wardrobe in their house. And like ladies come to tea and they like literally like they library. I'm like throwing things. I'm so excited. They library these like old timey sex books with like
amazing
lewd drawings out of the wardrobe in their house. Okay. So, they have a brother their brother is a duke, and basically like their brother. So when their mother died, there was kind of a rule set in place. Like she basically extracted a vow from him that he would never force any of them to marry. And so they were allowed to choose love. So here they all are, the four, like kind of vibing, and they all have like different feelings about love. But like Andromeda has this curious thing where she has been engaged for years.
Oh, I love this.
And she, no, it doesn't go the way you think, I don't think. So she has been engaged for years to this guy, Hubert, who like lives far away and like no one's ever met. Like her Duke brother was like away, and then like he came back, and Andromeda writes regularly to this man who lives far away, like a Canadian boyfriend. And like they have this like thing, and she receives packages from him. Like they have a back and forth. Like somebody is responding to her. And everybody believes, well, the brother believes she has this like man who's like willing to marry her, but like is nervous, like, I don't know, gun shy about getting married. And so fine. But like the reader immediately is like, something's up with this. And so the brother goes to his best friend, Tristan, who is the illegitimate son of the Earl of Whoosie What's It. And so, doesn't matter. Tristan is an illegitimate son, and he's older than the actual legitimate heir. Their father is dead, and the legitimate heir is his 13-year-old half-brother, Alex, who lives with, who like is around. Like we meet Alex. Really kind of charming. I was delighted by this book. So Tristan comes home from like being out, and it's our first look at Tristan, and he's like, it's in the third person, and we're in his POV, and he's like, he was not expecting a boy to be peeing on his house when he arrives like home that night. And then it turns out it's his 13-year-old half brother who has been like out with his 13-year-old, like also young titled boys and they have been like drinking. He's like, are you drunk? What's happening? What have you been doing? And he's like, well, you drink. And he's like, yeah, but you're 13. And he's like, you have a mistress. And he's like, you're 13. Like, you are too young for women. You are too young for drinking. what the fuck is happening, right? Like, and this child, this 13-year-old boy is like in deep grief because he lost his father.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and also like clearly has this real sense of like his older brother, who he loves and who he reveres, like, but doesn't own the title. Like there's sort of a real sense that this like teenager kind of gets the injustice of all of it too. And it's really like lovely, this whole setup. So here's the thing. They have an aunt who's basically like, you're illegitimate and you really are not a good influence on this 13-year-old. And he's like, I had nothing to do with this. Like you're the one who's sending him to these schools with these boys who like take him out and do stuff. And he's like, and at the same time, his best friend, this Duke, who's like up to his eyeballs and sisters who are unmarried, is like, I have an idea. What if, so Tristan has plenty of money, but he doesn't have the cachet of like a wife who can just like be a steady hand, like be a supportive female influence for his like half brother. And his best friend is like, hang on a second, I'm lousy with sisters who all need to get married. So what if I hook you up with my sister Charlotte, who is like quiet and unassuming? Charlotte is not. Charlotte also runs an erotic lending library, but like,
why would a brother know that though?
She plays the part, right? And Charlotte's also bad news. Charlotte's been in love with somebody I think is in a future book because Charlotte's been in love with some guy who she also like simultaneously loathes for years. Anyway, Charlotte's like, so he's like, no problem. Let me introduce you to my sister Charlotte, and then you guys can court. Don't kiss her, but you guys can court. And then, you can get married and that'll work out. Everybody's happy. So Charlotte's like, well, shit, if I have to meet this guy, I better go put on a dress that makes me look not great.
Yeah.
Right? Right? So she goes off, leaving Andromeda like alone. And Andromeda's like, well, I better go like entertain this guy while, So she goes into the sitting room where Tristan is sitting and he doesn't know he's never met these girls. She walks in. He's like, holy shit, I've never seen anybody so beautiful in my fucking life.
I love it.
He walks directly up to her. He's like, so are you in? She's like, in on what? He's like, would you like to be courted? And she's like, I think I would like to be courted in general. Like,
sure.
She's like,
yes,
in general.
This seems like a good idea. Yeah, I'd enjoy it.
And he's like, cool. Well, your brother was right that we should court, but he was wrong that we shouldn't kiss. Lays one on her.
Yeah.
She's like, he tastes like the sea and fucking sun.
Sure, of course.
Right? She's like, oh my God, I'm in love. What about Hubert? Jen, Hubert's her book dealer.
I mean, listen, everybody listening.
Like, the scandal. Go ahead.
If there's a real romance here named Hubert out there, please let us know. But I knew all along that Hubert was not going to be.
No, but Hubert's the rare book dealer. And so now, like, hang on a second. These 4 chaos demons are actually in no way good at, like, raising the level of civility in a house because they're lending, like, lewd books all over London. Chaos. Anyway, a real delight. And that is Never Woo the Wrong Lady, which he absolutely is doing from the jump by Charlie Lane.
It's like Kindle Unlimited, but, make it ladies.
A real treat. Aren't you so excited that we have done this work?
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. Okay, wait, Sarah. Okay.
Everybody's like, yeah, great job, assholes. You actually did the reading.
Okay, Sarah, I'm about to reveal the one I've been keeping a secret. And remember the whole time I was like, I'm going to trust the process and trust that the right connection is going to.
And it happened.
Because this book is called Dionysus in Wisconsin.
All right.
It is
Andromeda.
Exactly. You got me.
Wait, Dionysus in Wisconsin.
It is set in 1969. And
1969, I get it.
That's really all I need to say. No, it's not. I have so much more to say because I truly loved everything about this book. So this book is by E.H. Lupton, and it is the first in the Wisconsin Gothic series. In this book, okay, so our 2 heroes are Ulysses and Sam. Ulysses is a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in like magical studies. So this is a book that obviously Dionysus, right? It's got an element of magic to it. He should be, he's like working on his dissertation, but he also kind of works low key as like a little bit of like a ghost private investigator. So I found myself as I was reading thinking like, oh, we could have talked about this in the like I see dead people thing, because Ulysses is often like doing all this work and his whole entire family is gifted. Like his babushka, he lives in like a big old house with his family. His babushka like reads tarot cards at one point. I was like, I could have talked about it this episode, but I just read this book. Okay. So what happens is, and at first you're kind of like, what's going on here, right? So Sam Sterling is like 25. He is just coming back from getting a master's at Harvard or whatever. He's an archivist in the library. And, like there's something like weird about Sam. Like Ulysses can tell. And at one point, like they're in the library elevator together. And like the lights flicker out. Okay. And Sam's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And like the lights go out and Ulysses like, don't worry. He pulls out his Zippo lighter because, he pulls out a lighter and he like flicks it open and the temperature is dropped. And on the inside of the like steel doors of the elevator, it says, Dionysus is mine. And Sam is like, what the fuck is happening? And Ulysses is like, something really creepy is happening. And like they get attacked by demons. And it turns out that Sam, like Dionysus, is about to return to Earth. And where else would he go but Wisconsin, where everyone loves beer? I'm not, when I tell you how delighted I was by this book, I cannot tell you because I was delighted by this book.
This is terrific.
It is terrific. Like, so
Percy Jackson, but make it romance.
Yes. Make it a gay romance set in Wisconsin in 1969. It's everything everything I didn't know I wanted. So anyway, what it turns out is happening, and it takes Ulysses a while. So then, here's what happens. Sam goes to like a family dinner. And he comes back to see Ulysses. And at this point, they've had sex once or twice. And, like they're definitely like vibing with each other. And Ulysses is like, you've had a spell put on you. And this spell makes you like want to follow people's orders. And Sam's like, what are you talking about? Like, I just was home. And so what in breaking this curse, so essentially, like, Ulysses is like, don't worry, I can break the curse. But there's this, like, slap back on the person who did it. And it turns out that his stepmother has been essentially cursing him since he was 4.
What?
And the nature of the curse is that Sam is going to be a vessel for Dionysus's return. So Dionysus is going to come back to Earth and inhabit Sam, like, take over his body. And, like, Sam's going to be goodbye. Right? Like Ghostbusters. And Ulysses is like, well, I'm in love with you, so I'm going to have to save you. And it is like a rip-roaring kind of paranormal adventure. It is a bit of a mystery. It's got a bunch of family drama because, of course, why would Sam's father have had this woman be, married her and like cursing them and cursing him? And then like when Dionysus appears, it's just like, so Dionysus does come back. And like what's happening is like there's this one night where they go out to a bar and Sam goes out to dance. And then like all of a sudden Ulysses looks up and like everyone in the bar is like circling around him. And it's like a bacchanal. And I have to tell you, I really love this book.
That's really fun.
It was so
Wait,
fun.
who wrote this book?
E.H. Lupton is the author's name.
And are there other books?
Yes. So here's the part that's really cool. So first of all, this was shortlisted for the 2024 Lambda Literary Awards for gay romance. So like this is like a really well-regarded book. And the thing that is really cool and I'm actually very excited about is the series, the Wisconsin Gothic series, continues on with Sam and Ulysses, but they're like breaking and like solving other paranormal mysteries. So the next one is called Old Time Religion. And then the third one is called Troth. And I literally cannot wait to read them because, when you find a historical romance that just feels like 100% fresh.
So fun.
Dionysus in Wisconsin. You're welcome, everyone.
That's pretty great. I'm going to read that tonight. That sounds awesome.
It was awesome.
All right. Well, you said tarot. And so I'm going to go to astrology because I also have one that I could have talked about last week or 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. But I didn't read it in time. So, okay. I want to talk about All About That Duke by Mary Farmer.
Amazing.
Okay, wait. I have to pull the series title for this. So, okay, I really need you to Google this. I need you to look at this cover first. Everybody, look down. I hope
it'll be
it
there.
can be down in front of you, because. So, okay.
Oh, with the bicycle.
The premise of this series. I have to talk about the series first, which is called That Wicked O'Shea Family. And look, if you can see, this also has that big old-timey bicycle with the wheel, which I still cannot remember the name of, but it will come to me, everybody. Okay, so this series it's by Mary Farmer, and it is set in Ireland. And what drew me to this instantly, aside from the fact that this lady is fully on a bicycle on the cover, is that every single cover in this series is green because Ireland, and they all have bicycles.
Amazing. Look at that.
So perplexing, right? Here's the deal. I mean, this goes with a sure thing. We could do like bicycle romances.
And just do the series.
Okay. This is also a brother who was away from, his sisters. He has 4 or 5, some number of sisters. Okay. And I think there are 5 of them. And her brother Fergus returns to Ireland and discovers that like they have all been like in full chaos. Like at the beginning of this series, they are fully doing whatever they want. He is living on an estate in England that's part of their dowry, and they're fine with that because like they get to do whatever. And so like they've like started a brewery in town, and they're like causing trouble all over the place. And he's like, this is crazy. Like, we need to get you guys like sorted. And so he says, like, I want to move you all like into one house. I want you all to be like together. We need to get you all married. And he's like, I'm going to give each of you a bicycle, which will give you like a sense of freedom, but like keep you close to home. And of course, what he doesn't realize is that like now that they have bikes, they can get wherever they want to do whatever they want, right? Real shenanigans. And so they each, like, as I understand it, in each of these books, like the bike brings them to like some chaos event. Well, in this case, our heroine, Chloe, she's into astronomy and astrology. And so she has like this like very powerful microscope, this very powerful telescope. And she likes to take it to a particular estate's like a hill on a particular estate in Ireland that has like a really great view of the sky at night. There is a meteor shower. She has like biked in the dark up onto this hill to like view this meteor shower. And while she's doing this in the country, in the estate house, there is a ball that is being thrown for an English duke who has been not exiled, but like has basically been sent to Ireland to find a wife because he has like wreaked rakish chaos along in London. And like all the women in London are like, this guy has been just like breaking hearts all through London. And so he gets sent off to his aunt in Ireland to meet a woman. And his aunt is like trotting him out as an English duke to like a million country house parties and a million dances and teas. And he escapes a ballroom finally because he's like, I cannot dance with one more person, walks up onto this like hill and promptly in the dead of darkness like trips into her bike,
of course,
and like like spills her lantern, causes a little bit of an explosion, and then almost breaks her telescope. And then like, so this is the meet cute, but Chloe is like very sweet and very charming, and she's sort of like, so she's immediately like, well, you're chaos, like what's your deal? And then she's like, when's your birthday? And he tells her. And it turns out he's a Scorpio. And he's like, well, when's, and she's like, oh, well, that won't work for me because I'm a Gemini and we won't, there's nothing.
No chance.
We're not compatible. And then she's like, but I am kind of attracted to you. And I wonder if there's something else in your chart that would like make that happen. So do you mind giving me your date and time and place of birth? And I'm going to run your star chart and I'll come to your house tomorrow and give it to you. But like, really, I just want to understand like why I'm sort of attracted to you. So he does. He happens to know his time, date, time, and place of birth. Time of birth is very much like this a very clever little way that he knows that his time of birth. And so she goes off and she does his star chart. And like what's really fascinating about this is this is a very easy romance. These two are they're really lovely together. They clearly like adore each other, but she has his number. And there are these great kind of bantering moments where she's like, well, is it true that you had 2 married mistresses at the same time? And he's like, well, yeah, but it wasn't quite like that. And she's like, And is it true that, this other thing happened too? And is it true that you were caught like naked in a such and such? And he's like, well, it really, yes, but, and she's like, you seem like you're not really great at being a man in the world.
Amazing.
And so they're just like, it's really kind of great. And this is just like 2 people falling in love. Like this one is for anybody out there who's like, maybe I need like a little less.
I don't need the Return of the God.
Mutton Riders or like Return of the God. I need just like 2 people who are like really lovely falling in love together, falling in love with each other. I will say the Irish of it all is sort of like hand waved. It doesn't really feel Irish. It feels very like English, but it's nice. It's a really nice romance that I would happily read again. It was a very lovely couple of hours.
And sometimes you just want that, right? Like just a great romance.
I mean, this is the service that we provide for you here at Fated Mates.
Yeah, right. Every varietal.
There's something for everyone. So that is Mary Farmer's All About That Duke.
I just sent you everybody. I'll put it in show notes too. My son is a Gemini and I am a Scorpio. And so anytime there's like a really funny meme, I send it to him. And there's this one and it's like 2 people with sunglasses on, like spying. And it says Scorpio and Gemini secretly teaming up whenever they hear any gossip or useful information. So I think there's a future for these 2. I believe in that.
They'll be okay.
They are going to be okay. All right. So I am going to talk about, let me look at what my list is. I have 2 more. Okay. I'm going to talk about I don't think this is like a great leap, but I feel like I'm never going to beat Andromeda to Dionysus. So we're just going to go off. The Wayward Duke by Katrina Kendrick. And this is a marriage and trouble romance. And
I'm so excited that you read Katrina Kendrick because somebody sent me all of her her publisher sent me all of her books this week.
And I was like, just in time. I think I probably was like, oh, great, perfect timing. So this book is set in 1874 and Caroline is the Duchess of, I don't know, whatever, the Duchess of Hastings, I guess. Or
the Duchess of whatever.
The Duchess of whatever, blah, blah, blah.
The Duchess of who's he wants it.
And it starts off with her, she's a painter and she has like a nude man in her studio and she's painting him. And of course you're like, oh, is this going to be the hero? No, it is not. He is just literally like a model and she is...
just wallpaper.
Yeah, just wallpaper. And so what happens is her husband, Julian, walks in and they have been estranged essentially for like 8 years. So when he is in town, because Parliament is seated, he stays somewhere else. They had like a big falling out and we don't really know what caused it. There are some hints that it has to do with, there were like 3 really good friends. So they like grew up together and with a friend named Grace, and Grace died. And so at the beginning, you're kind of based on Caroline's like narration or, inner interiority. Like she's like, was he, did he really love Grace more? That's when he like left. And so you're kind of like, wait, what was going on? And so basically he says, well, for romance reasons, I'm going to need to stay here for a month. Right. And then I'll go to Italy and you won't see me again. And she is like, honestly kind of pissed at him. She's like, look, it's humiliating. Everybody knows that we're estranged. And if you stay in this house, but not in our room, the servants are going to talk and I can't take it. So I think what we need to do is present a united front for this month only while you're here. And then that'll like quell some of this gossip about us. And then you can go off to Italy and it'll be fine. So he agrees to this, and I was very curious about like the evolution of like their relationship. Now it turns out that Julian does some work for the crown and like does a little bit of spying, and you know what I mean? Like there's like a bunch of like other stuff going on here. I hope that's right. I think that's right. I just said that. I was like, is that right? I read so many historicals. Anyway, so there is some code breaking that he is really good at, but there's a person who is sending letters in code that are like announcing terrorist acts, like this thing's gonna explode or whatever. And they aren't having any luck cracking the code in time to prevent these things from happening. But Julian's an expert codebreaker, but so is Caroline. And so he essentially asks her for some help, and they like kind of are doing this together. And in so doing, like kind of realize like maybe they have a chance to repair what was broken. Now, everybody check your content warnings. I don't want to spoil what happened between them. But it is, maybe okay, how about this? Like everybody fast forward if you don't want to know, but it has to do with her having a miscarriage and he was not there. And when he returns and finds out about it, she basically is so devastated that she's like, he spends months trying to get through to her and she is just so lost without, right? And so she's just like, get out. And so this is the thing that they have not been able to get past. And so, but now it's years later. And so they finally have this opportunity to really like talk about what happened for the first time without the immediacy of this pain and anguish and guilt. So I just thought, what I really loved about this book is like it had a really strong external plot with like this terrorist and the code breaking and all this business, but it didn't really lessen the really like beautiful kind of connection between the two of them. And this was like a marriage in trouble book where you really felt like these people just were young and thought they were doing the right thing. The reason he was gone was not for a bad reason. And it just like, because of it, they just couldn't see a way to like be together. And now it's the right time. And I just found it to be I found it to be like one of those historical romances that just felt like it had a deep well of feeling that it was really drawing upon.
Yeah.
Right? So that's The Wayward Duke by Katrina Kendrick.
Oh, I'm so glad I have that one. So I'm going to read that too very soon. All right. I want to talk about Louisa Darling. And I know you worked on this book.
I did.
So, and full disclosure, Louisa is my friend, but I would never, this book.
We would not steer you wrong.
I want to talk about Where Have All the Scoundrels Gone?
So good.
Which
it has the best opening of a book that I've read in a long time.
Okay. It begins, I'm going to set the scene. Okay. So it begins at an underground boxing club, which we all know, like already Sarah is in. This is the second book in her Dukes in Disguise series. So the name of this club is called the Nemesis, and it is basically like MMA on steroids. Like there are no rules. It is a boxing ring. These are brutal fights, and the way that it's structured is there are these like intense fights, and the man who wins the fight at the end of the night can select a woman from the crowd to like take to bed. So the Duke of Ashbourne has a secret, Jen. And that secret is that he is the winningest man at the Nemesis. Like is a duke by day, and by night he fucking destroys people in a boxing ring, right? But he never chooses
Oh, no.
a woman. Like, at the end of every night, he never chooses a woman. Now, Elizabeth Pickford is very controlled. She is extremely put together. She is the chaperone for the Duke of Ashbourne's half-sister. And she is incredibly practical. But she gets access to the Nemesis, and she goes to the Nemesis to watch one of these fights. And she is essentially like standing there, and she watches this man absolutely destroy another man. And he turns and he looks into the audience and he has never selected a woman to be with. And he points at her.
He points at her.
He's like, her.
It's so good.
And
I was
so
literally screaming.
hot.
Yes.
It's so hot. And then it goes back. The book goes back, several weeks, and we see how they have come to this, like, these two people have, like, she is essentially like a servant to his half-sister who he has a terrible relationship with. He is cold and unyielding. There is not an ounce of like human feeling in this man. And she realizes, like, he comes home battered and bruised from one of his fights, and she helps him. She like uses her like petticoat to bind up like a cut that he has.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the Nemesis, and she realizes that this masked fighter is wearing her petticoat bandage. It's like old school medieval, like when they would wrap the jousting, like whatever it was called, in with like a favor from the ladies. Anyway, it's so hot, you guys.
Well, and then
when they finally like figure out who each other are.
Sure. Well, because this is like my favorite part is like she knows it's him and he knows it's her, but neither of them thinks the other one knows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, the historical romance thing where like everyone's face blind once you've got a mask on. I don't even care. I was so into it.
Listen, that is great. Romance science.
I believe we've discussed this, right? It is so good. Oh, and it's really, I think the thing for me about this book is like, it really highlights like the whole thing about like control and then like society's rules.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's a cook. He doesn't know that, right?
At like a cook at a posting inn, like out in the middle of nowhere, that has been a kind of joke to him. He knows the place she is a cook. Oh, God. He has to come down like 25 pegs. It's so good.
It's terrific.
I mean, every book in this series. So this begins with a novella that's basically like what's it called? The marriage
trap. Yeah.
The Parent Trap, but make it a romance. Then there is the first book in the series, which is Don't Let Your Dukes Grow Up to Be Scoundrels, where we meet like, it's basically like Schitt's Creeky. And then this one, with the fucking bare knuckle boxing and the masks and the petticoat bandages. It's so hot. And you're going to love this. Also, for audiobook listeners, Don't Let Your Dukes Grow Up to Be Scoundrels is narrated by Mary Jane Wells.
Yeah, and I'm assuming she'll have Mary Jane Wells do this one too. And it's not,
she's doing the next one too, but it's just not out yet.
Which, like, what else do you need to know? Okay, I have one more. It is called Winnie West Has an Agenda by Kat Sterling, and it is set in Seattle in 1908. So I also just want to say, like, I feel like I had a really good time reading books that were not just like Regencies, if that's your thing. And in this book, Winnie West is a widow She's like 23 or 24, and her husband has been dead for 2 years, and she has left Boston and moved to Seattle, where she works as a stenographer for a paper, but she wants to be a reporter. And so the book opens with her like kind of like girding her loins to go up into her boss's office and ask if she can do some reporting work. But this is a deeply sexist society. And so, right, the boss is like, here now, little lady, get out of my fucking office. And she's so upset. Both, like, she was so convinced it was going to work. You know what I mean? And I really found myself feeling deeply sympathetic to her at this point. Like, she really thought it was going to work. So anyway, she ends up kind of going for a walk. And while she's out on the street, she sees a woman who is doing some leafleting and trying to drum up support for women to come to a suffragettes like meeting, right? Like women should have the right to vote and Western women are going to lead the way. And Winnie is really like truly like, hell yes. Like I just had a man turn me down and I'm kind of like, I'm not going to take it anymore, basically. And so what happens is she goes to the first meeting. Now, one of the things that I like just want to like talk about at this point, because I thought it was really, I was very like won over by this, is she gets to the meeting and the woman who's running it, I mean, because right, like the suffragettes were very white, right? And so it's always like a little tricky when you're going to read something like this because you're like, how is this author going to handle it? And this particular group she's in, essentially, there's some young women there and some older women there. And this particular group is like, we are not going to discriminate. Like anybody who wants to be part of our group can be. And you know what I found myself thinking, and this is something we talked about with Adriana last week, like as I read that part, because I was so like heartened by it, is sometimes like a really good historical romance, when it is like honest about like the history, can feel like the opportunity for a do-over. And here we are right now, girding our loins and like making communities and trying to think about what it's going to be like to like work together to fight this. And instead of feeling like, well, that's not the way it really worked, instead I felt like, okay, right the fuck on, right? Like you could read this book and feel like, okay, I can do this. And like, right, like it's, I don't know. So anyway, here's the hero's name is Mac. He also works at the paper. And he has been promised, like his father was one of the owners, but his uncle's now in charge. And his father, when he passed away, the mom essentially made a deal with the uncle. Like once Mac is old enough, he'll take over. But Mac's whole like way of kind of dealing with his uncle has been sort of like, I'm just going to let him do what he's going to do. But then when I take over, I'll do it my way. But what happens is that the I think his name's Horace, the uncle, is like, we need to take a stand on these suffragettes, and I think we're going to be anti. And Mac's like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, we're going to be pro, of course, right? This is the right thing to do. And essentially, it's like really, it felt just so like it could have been written today, right? Where the uncle was like, yeah, but like no one's going to buy our paper if we say that. Like we have to be on this, right? Like as a journalist, essentially, like our job is to tell people what they want to hear, and not to like advocate for something. And so he's like, you know what we can do is we can have Winnie, we'll tell her that she can write articles, but then secretly what we'll do is you will write an opposition piece. And so Mac is like, well, that's super shitty. And I don't really want to be a part of it. But if I don't do it, someone else will do it. And if I don't do it, I won't get the paper. And so they are essentially like, the tension is like, Mac is like, I deeply respect what she's trying to do, but I just need to like hold until I can take over. And so in order to like not tee her up like this and betray her, have her write this piece and then have me like tear it down, instead I'm just going to tell her ideas are no good. And it's just like really fascinating because you're essentially watching a man learn that capitulation is not the way.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? And so I found...
That's great, though.
It is. It felt... And like I said, I mean, this is, I think, a couple of years old. But I truly was like... wow, do I need this book right now? Right? Like we have talked so much about like historical romance can make you feel brave. Right. And that this whole plot about Winnie being like, hell yes, women should be able to vote. Hell yes, I should be able to have a job. And I just and have Mac be a person who's like, I'm a good person, but I'm not really willing to stand up for that right now because I see a future where I'll just get what I want if I just wait long enough. And of course, that's not how it works. So I just really thought it was terrific. I thought it was doing really, truly, I was like, this is how people are, right? It just felt so real to me. So Winnie West Has an Agenda by Kat Sterling was my last one.
I love it.
It was great.
Listen, I haven't thought about anything outside of these books for 2 hours. So thanks everybody for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Gosh, I had the most fun. I still like, I'm going to download all of yours. I'm going to read more. My goal is to like just keep lifting up voices in historicals. Thank you to everybody who is recommending historicals to us. Thank you to everybody, all the authors who are like hitting us up and saying like, my books are on KU, head over and read them. Like, please keep telling us. I know it sometimes like we don't always respond. And I try really hard. I'm Instagram.
Yes.
And so like, I try really hard to reply to everybody. I don't always, but like, I do download your books and I do pass messages on to Jen. And so we love hearing from you about all of that. I want to name a couple of people who we have talked about in the past or who like we know, are people who we think are great. I just want to say like Isabel Kamal, who I've talked about in the past, is terrific. And I highly recommend The Temple of Persephone, which I talked about on the funeral episode. Also, Grave Temptation, which I also talked about on the funeral episode by June Westwood.
I have a couple people I just want to, these are authors we've maybe talked about before, but they have new books that I just didn't have a chance to check out, but I want to like just name drop. Alexandra Harvey had a book come out this past month called A Deal with the Devil. This week or next, Samara Parrish has a new one coming out called While the Duke Was Sleeping, which is essentially like a retelling of While You Were Sleeping. And then earlier this month, Lindsay Lovis had a book, Never Gamble Your Heart. And these were 3 historicals that were sort of like on my list to try and get to, and I just didn't. There are a couple other ones that are coming out. Like I said at the beginning, they'll be coming out in the spring. And so we will mention them in upcoming episodes and also in our spring preview.
That is that. I am Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can listen to us every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us online at fatedmates.net. And if you click on show notes there, it'll take you to the show notes for this episode where every single book we talk about on the episode is listed. And you can find them all in one easy place. Also, there are all the other show notes that we sort of promise, including information on all the stuff that we talk about in banter. And this week, you can also find information about my class, which is I'm teaching a beginner's romance class via Zoom on Sunday, the 23rd. So join me for that. That's new content every year. And that class is specifically designed for somebody who has an idea but doesn't know what to do or is in the middle of their first manuscript and stuck. You are not alone. I am in the middle of my 21st manuscript and stuck. So, join me. You can find all of that information in show notes. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky for now, but it's always a question as to whether we'll continue to be there as things change in the real world. If you love talking about romance novels and you want to share books you love or talk to other listeners of the podcast and other romance lovers about books they love, can we recommend joining our Patreon, where you get access to one episode of additional banter every month from me and Jen, but also to the Discord, the Fated Mates Discord, where literal 1,000 other people are hanging around talking about romance 24/7. For Fated Mates listeners, don't forget to stay tuned for a special audiobook excerpt from Wooing the Witch Queen by Stephanie Burgess, narrated by Amanda Lee Cobb. Thanks to Macmillan Audio for that. And don't forget to click through and enter the sweepstakes to win one of 5 free audiobooks of Wooing the Witch Queen this week. Tell us about your favorite historicals, especially if they're people that you don't see talked about all the time on all of the comment places, wherever we are. We're always looking for good recommendations, and we love you, historical. We do. We're with you.
It was a cool, rainy evening in Estavial City when Astarion's Archduke decided not, after all, to give his in-laws the gift of his own early demise. He was at the opera when the decision crystallized within him, sitting in the velvet-hung cage of the royal box. His father-in-law, Astarion's chief minister, sat straight-backed beside him, silver mustache magnificently waxed, and uniformed chest glittering with medals. His burly brother-in-law, the High General of Astarion's armies, lounged carelessly on his other side, one leg spread out to block him from going anywhere. On the stage below, a soprano warbled tunefully about lost love, while opera glasses sparkled eagerly across the tiers, all fixed upon the most famous young widower in the audience, Archduke Felix Augustus von Astarion. The Archduke was, of course, clothed in endless black. It was the only color ever to be found in his wardrobe nowadays, no matter how many times he requested otherwise. It would make the perfect, breathlessly awaited climax to this evening's public performance for him to simply lean forward, overwhelmed by his so famous grief, and topple from the high royal box onto the stage below. Felix, the 23-year-old man behind the title, had grieved his wife's death 13 months ago. He had grown up with Emmeline, the kind-hearted daughter of his grim regent, and one of the only other children he'd ever been allowed to meet. They had protected one another against her father as well as possible throughout their shared childhood, and the quiet moments of peace they'd found together had formed his sweetest memories during those cold years. Felix had been not only glad, but desperately relieved when he'd first learned, on the cusp of adulthood, that she was the bride chosen for him by the Count, rather than some foreign stranger. When Emmeline had unexpectedly been taken ill, he had held her hand to the very end, and when her eyes had been shut by the highest of the attending physicians, he had lost all dignity, and wept before witnesses for the first time since his parents had died, and Count von Herzenstoff had arrived to instill brutal rules of discipline upon him. He was surprised at the time that his father-in-law allowed so many servants and courtiers to witness such a shameful breakdown. It was only when he finally emerged from the fog of grief, several months later, that he realized the simple truth. With Emmeline's death, Count von Herzenstoff had lost his prime claim to the Archduchy of Astarion, so he was already planning his next move. At 23, Felix was too old to require a regent. In the eyes of the law, he could, theoretically, dismiss his father-in-law from the role of chief minister and wrench control of the army from his brother-in-law's violent grasp. He could even choose to wed again and bring a rival family into power. It all seemed wildly unlikely to Felix himself, who barely knew any of the other members of his high cabinet and had never been allowed a private conversation with any of them. But Count Gerard von Herzenstoff had not become the most powerful man in Astarion by dismissing any potential threats on the horizon. He had been preparing, even at the moment of his daughter's deeply disappointing death, for the worst that he could imagine to happen, and Felix had played directly into his hands with his unmanly display of emotion. The Count would never willingly give up the power he had seized 15 years ago. Having been appointed temporary regent by his fellow members of Astarion's high cabinet, he had chosen to appoint himself chief minister on the day of Felix's 18th birthday, although he'd had the political sense to send out that proclamation in Felix's name. By then, Felix hadn't even tried to protest. He had been taught for years, by means of ruthless beatings, strategic isolation and carefully calculated starvation, that the Count would brook no challenges to his authority, and Count von Hertzendorf recognized no mercy when it came to enforcing his will. The laws of the Empire and the force of public opinion were both strong enough that he couldn't push Felix over the balcony now, in front of hundreds of fascinated onlookers. However, he could make utterly certain that no one would be surprised when news of the Archduke's eventual, tragically self-inflicted death was finally released to the newspapers. Felix had no doubt that all the details of that upcoming death had already been carefully planned.
Thank you for listening to this clip provided to you by Macmillan Audio. To hear more, look for this title wherever audiobooks are sold.